The Against All Odds podcast, sponsored by Oak Forest Recovery. Welcome to the Against All Odds podcast. My name is RJ, and I'm here with co-host Rachel. And today we have Barbie.
Yes.
And Barbie
Welcome.
Thank you.
I've heard amazing things.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
I've heard amazing things.
Really?
About you. Yes. Yes.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. No, it's an honor. I
really
appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah,
It's,
thanks for coming out.
My sobriety and my recovery and just being a steward of the 12 steps is one of my greatest honors. And so
How long have you been sober
now? 13 years. I just celebrated
Wow.
13 years, March 29th, 2012.
Congrats.
I was not a vision for you.
Yeah.
I was not a vision for you. And waved the white flag that morning.
Was that your first time getting sober?
No.
Okay.
No. The first time was 1994.
Okay.
And you know, that time there were just no intentions of staying sober. I was just out of drugs.
Yeah,
I remember that like
Yeah.
like all my friends went to rehab. They all, you know, their lives blew up early and you know, their mom or dads were like, "You're going to Exodus." Do you remember Exodus and Marina Del Rey?
I've heard about it a ton.
Like Kurt Cobain escaped. It was just kind of the notorious. That's where all my friends went. And I just kind of always carried this narrative that I wasn't deserving of stability and clean clothes and food. You know, we'll kind of get into the life I grew up in, but it fell into line with, I'm not worthy of going to rehab. Like I have to detox alone. And, and so within that space of detoxing and desperation, I finally broke down to my mom and was like, I need help. Like I hadn't slept in days and I had been on this, you know, methamphetamine run and she was like, "You need to go to AA." And she dropped me off at that first meeting.
Wow.
And I remember walking in Second and Hill, Venice. I was
Did you live down there?
No.
Were you in Malibu at the time?
In 1994, I was in Malibu. I really didn't know any meetings in Malibu and I had no interest. And some of my older friends who had gotten sober, like old school Malibu people, would do Venice meetings. And so I went to Second and Hill and I was like, whoa, there's some cute boys. And like, it was kind of like this 90s Venice scene. And I was like, I can get down with this. So it was like this dress up, you know, like every Wednesday night, Second and Hill, I was going to get cute and I was going to go. And I just had no intentions, you know, of like, you know, people were like, "Do you have a big book?" I'm like, "I'm good."
Yeah.
You know,
I don't need that part of it.
Like,
I relate.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Do you have a sponsor? I was like, you know, I sponsor myself. I got this, you know, so, and you know, there was just no defense. It's like, and I remember I went to Cabo with this group of girls who were not sober and it was my 69 day of sobriety. And I kind of like, you know, being 19 years old, I was like, I'm 69 days sober. Yeah. And I met a guy named Ken. And, you know, we were out and Ken was a bucket list. He was on the bucket list, like the to-dos within my life. And Ken was on there. And I was like, I might as well just check that one off. But I was like, I can't do Ken and Cabo sober. So that was like the green light to, you know, relapse. And when I got back, I had no intention of coming back into the rooms, until I was 37. Until life blew up.
So take us back. Where'd you grow up?
What a story. I grew up in Malibu. I grew up in Malibu with the name
Malibu Barbie.
And sometimes I share, like, I don't know if that's what made me an alcoholic because I hated the stereotype of being Malibu Barbie because it just followed me everywhere I went and people would meet me and they're like, "Whoa, you have brown hair." And I'm like, "Yeah, I have brown hair."
Aren't you supposed to be blonde?
And they're like, I thought, "Oh, okay, never mind." And I was like, "You thought I was supposed to be like tan, big boobs, blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, the whole
Baywatch or something."
Yeah. And I just, it was almost like this intention to be the anti-Barbie. Like I just wanted to like be the anti-Barbie. And there were a lot of pieces in my life that kind of fell in line with this Malibu Barbie. You know, we had horses and my mom got a motorhome. And then in 1986, she rolls up in a Corvette and just every single one of those things, you know, that fell in with the I was like, oh my gosh. But my mom was one of us, you know, she struggled throughout the 80s. She was quite sick. And part of her addiction was men, so there was just, it was like this open door of just men, and her emptiness kind of needed this validation from these badass men. Can I swear?
For sure.
Okay, cool. I just,
I
don't swear from the podium. So I was like, I don't know.
No, be you fully.
Okay.
100% you.
So she, she loved anyone who was badass and like had this like hard image. And she was a race car driver.
Oh, interesting.
And that was like her first passion, her first love.
So
and
she was a badass.
she was a badass.
Wow.
She was, her name's, we call her, I'm not going to say her name. We call her Maggie Mayhem. And because she's just full mayhem.
Yeah.
Like not one time did she ever do my nails. She was like, for my 16th birthday, I got a toolbox filled with tools. Like I just wanted, I'm like, just brush my hair. But she would like street race, and her addiction kind of, picked up steam in that world. And the bikers, she loved bikers. And so early on, it was like, the Hells Angels, the Vagos, that, she didn't care like if,
they
the clubs
warred with each other.
Because she was done with that one, and she would invite the next one in. And so it was just real chaotic, my life. It was me and my 3 brothers, just, 6 acres. It was like motorcycles and hot rods and just this testosterone filled home. And I'm this little girl just needing a hug. I just needed a fucking hug. Like I remember that like feeling like I just wanted someone to like hold me and like rub my back and be like, it's okay. Like you're okay. But that wasn't the case. And so just the manifestation of this insecurity and what was missing in my life, and also being exposed to, these elements that were very inappropriate, for 6, 7, 8-year-olds. Were you
the oldest or the youngest?
No, I was the second down. So I had an older brother. But there was a dive bar in Malibu called the Doom Room. Okay. And I share about this because it just is kind of telling of my childhood. I remember no phone numbers from my childhood. Like it's almost like this like empty, vacant life lived, but I remember the Doom Room phone number, like 457-994.
Interesting. Why?
Because I called it every single night asking for my mom to come home.
Oh,
and so like she would come
it.
home with the entire bar, and it was just this like salty, shady local dive bar. And around 2 a.m, all of a sudden I would hear like the flood of people come in, and it was like the white noise of my childhood. I didn't have like the rainmaker and the wave machine. It was like this ruckus partying downstairs. And so I don't have that moment of my first drink. Like, I just remember going downstairs as a little girl before school, and people would be hiding because the kids were up, and there would be residual cocaine on the table. And my brother and I would make our own little cocktails, mixing colors with the drinks. These are the weird, like vivid memories I have. Yeah. And my brother told me, he was like, if you put that white stuff in your mouth, it'll make it numb. And I was like, no way. And so I did that. And like, that was my favorite thing. So that was like the first thing I would do when I would go downstairs. Wow. Is like, where's the white stuff? Like,
and how old were you at the time?
Like 6, 7.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we would sip drinks, like pour the brown drinks in the brown drinks. And,
being little kids.
Like the red wine with the red wine, and, the beer with the beer. And we would sip them thinking like, oh, we're playing adult. We're playing grown up. This is what grown-ups do. And then I would go to school, and looking back now, I'm like, it's so wild. It was also the 80s, and this isn't like an unusual story. But there would be alcohol in my system, and there would be like cocaine within my, system. Yeah. And I would go to school, and I loved it. Like I loved feeling a part of, like I loved growing into belonging, in this family because I was the only girl. My mom didn't like wear dresses, she was badass. And so I just felt awkward. And then I just wanted people to come over, I wanted like my girlfriends to come over, and no one would come over, and I didn't understand. And later I realized that, talking to girlfriends that I had known my whole life, they're like, oh no, my mom wouldn't let me go to your house, and so just the separation and feeling different. And,
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And the neglect, I would take inventory of other people's homes, and I was like, oh my gosh, their clothes smell like Downy, and they have a stacked fridge, and there's a homework schedule, 5:30 homework, and I didn't have any of that. It was just kind of chaos. So that's kind of like the introduction to the open window of me feeling like I was supposed to be an alcoholic to fit into this, dynamic that I was born into without any structure or discipline or guidance. And, there's so much forgiveness for my mom, now, because I understand, like her alcoholism had its claws in her, and her addiction was just, she couldn't, being a mom was just, it was too hard.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Where was Dad?
So Dad jumped ship when I was 6 months old. He decided, this dad thing wasn't for him, even though we were like planned and my mom and dad were married. He had his own, drug issues back then, and he was a race car driver, and he ended up, and I don't mean like NASCAR, I mean like old LA, Lyon's drag strip, LA County, Saugus, streetcar modified, quarter mile. That was their thing. And he moved back to Wichita. When I was very, very little. And, he got married 6 times. And, again, that was like priority, were these wives and women. That's a lot of work has gone into Dad.
Right.
A lot of work has gone into healing the abandonment. Everything just kind of circled back to, in my head, like these daddy issues of like, if my dad was here, that hole that, I had to fill with drugs and alcohol and men and
wouldn't
whatever.
Be here to the same degree.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had that like emptiness. But, I shared about this recently at, your meeting. I held him hostage to this unrealistic expectation, to this title dad that he was completely incapable of showing up as. And I was able to find forgiveness in that space and see that like maybe he was trying to show up as my friend. And so I kind of changed the narrative, and I was like, you know what, maybe we can be friends, and, put the effort forward, and got to see him and with my kids. And there was a beautiful experience with my grandma. I had shared, I held my grandma hostage too, right? Like she birthed him. She was responsible. And she was like this innocent, sweet lady.
You're like, this is your fault.
Yeah. I was like, you birthed him. Like, where did you go wrong? I was just like so quick to blame and like hold a hefty resentment. And when I made my amends to my dad, and that was my amends, it's not that I left him, it was I held him hostage, and I was attached to this narrative, unwilling to look at it any different, and unwilling to change it. And as soon as I was willing and to soften my heart and let him come in as my friend, I took my kids back to Kansas, and it was my grandma's 90th birthday. And I was, I think, 4 years sober at that point. And my grandma saw, all the kids together with my dad and me. And I remember her just sitting there, just like with this smile on her face. Oh. And we left on Monday, and she died in her sleep on Wednesday.
Wow.
And I would have missed it.
Yeah.
I would have missed that. And so like the healing, I feel like, is just so orchestrated, right? Like there's so many layers of like divine intervention.
For sure.
That, I always like, question, like, if you believe that wasn't orchestrated by something so much bigger than this in this mind, then, let's talk. Because there's so much magic in that space. So after that, I opened the door for my dad and I to be homies. He hasn't even called me since my son passed away, but that's like, he doesn't know how to be a friend.
Right.
And I have no expectations. And I'm like, you know what? That's you're not a great friend. That's okay.
Right.
Like that's not my journey. That's your journey. And I can like release you from any expectation and like live my life and send you love. But it's not my, your life is not for me to like come in and try to dictate and, tell you how to live it.
Right.
Like these are your lessons, really.
Yeah.
Right. I totally skipped through my.
No, yeah.
Oh, that's
You're
okay.
good.
We can do some
we can
jumps.
jump around. We're also really good at like getting back onto the highway too. I was just imagining you at like 6 and 7 and like trying cocaine in the morning.
Right.
Yeah.
And going to school and like trying to figure this out in this like almost a carnival with like
it was
really interesting characters.
It was yes. It was a total carnival. Is like the perfect word.
Right.
And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like I'm 6 years old and I'm doing cocaine. Like I had no idea.
No, for sure.
I was just like, the white stuff is fun.
Right.
Yeah.
When did it become intentional? Like when did it become like that? Do you remember?
Yeah. I mean, with drugs later than the alcohol. The alcohol was like summer between 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
And I snuck out of my house. There was a party down the street. And Malibu's pretty rural. I don't mean like 5 houses down. I mean like half a mile through canyons and gullies. And I went to that party and I remember there was a 6-pack of Corona. It was like the bottles. And I remember thinking like, I'm going to show them like the family that I grew up in, and I'm going to show them how badass I am. And, like I can do this. It wasn't even like, oh, I'm sipping my first beer. It was almost like I went into that space with something to prove.
Like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Like
I've watched this for years.
Exactly. It was totally that mindset. And there was just no holding back. It was like, I was almost showing off in a weird way. But I pounded like 6 beers.
Right.
Like I did the whole little like 6-pack of Corona. And I don't know what the time lapse was, but I believe like right after I finished the 6th one, like I was done, and just already in the bushes throwing up. And my friend who was there called my mom, and she came and picked me up. And I remember driving home, she was so pissed. And I remember like, why are you pissed?
Yeah.
Like, what?
You should be proud of me.
Yeah. I was like, what is happening? And I remember just kind of like wobbling like in this blackout, and I had been throwing up in the bushes. And I got home and I was sick the entire night, like just, the early, like sleeping on the bathroom floor. And in the morning, that feeling of, like I earned that. And I'm just going to get better at it. Like it wasn't like I feel terrible, and I did feel terrible. I was so hungover, but there was never that like I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
Like it was like
I'm going to get better at this.
I'm going to get really good at this. I'm going to get really good at this. And so that was like the first like blackout, drunk, throwing up. And then it just quickly, 8th grade, it was like the weed. I would go to Sunsplash, into reggae, into the Grateful Dead, and, just kind of getting introduced to, it was like the Malibu, like weed, drugs, alcohol. It was all kind of part of this beach lifestyle. And by the time I got into 9th grade, like it was over. Like it was over. And this
is
like 90s Malibu.
80s, late 80s.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is 88.
Okay.
And Malibu was wild. Like people don't realize like how wild Malibu was.
Way more back then than it is now, right?
I mean now it's like,
different. Yeah.
I kind of laugh at it. It's like, no, we would have raging parties, like keg parties at the Levels, up Winding Way. Backyard punk rock. We had like our little, like any small town, we had our bands, we had like our like hesh metal band, we had our punk rock band, our reggae band, our blues band, and they would all get together and we would have these 500, people crazy parties with like kegs, and the cops would come, and this was like a every weekend thing. So I would frequent these parties at starting 12, 13 at a young age. And so it just, there's something in the water with Malibu that no longer exists.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And it was fun and it was wild. So by the time I got to ninth grade, my education, I struggled in school because I didn't get enough sleep. I was malnourished, just all the
And
neglect.
nobody was like holding you account to, nobody was checking the grades.
No one
Nobody
checked the grades. No one cared. No one helped me with my homework. So it was like this recipe, right? Like I grew up in this home, there were no like healthy parameters. And I was just already like, unruly. It was like this anarchist mentality. I remember this feeling of like, it's me against the world and I have to just survive. Yeah. And, it just didn't feel safe. It didn't feel, so I was kind of like setting my own stage for what life was going to look like. The first school I got kicked out of I was there for 9 days, and I went to 7 schools in 3 years.
Really?
And never moved. And, the geographic.
And so you would have to drive from Malibu to different.
Well, I started at Samo High from Point Dume. Okay. And then 9 days later got in trouble and then got put into Louisville, the all girls Catholic school. Okay. I was on like every, like disciplinary, whatever, uniform, academic, and I ended up getting kicked out of that one. I got caught smoking weed and like forged my mom's signature and spelled her name wrong. Like they were like, you are not, no. And then tried to go back to Samo High, got in a gang fight because I was drunk at a party, and the high rolling Crip tagged HRC and I crossed it out in front of them. I don't, the things you do, things you do, right? In a blackout, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know why you did that. Yeah.
How did your mom react to all of this?
She,
it was just like,
it wasn't like I got one report card that was straight F minuses. That means like you didn't go to school. Like you did not care. She thought it was funny and put it on the refrigerator for everyone to come over and see. She's like, I did not know that was possible. I'm like, well, now you do. Everything was F minus. Wow. And that was in 10th grade.
Yeah.
And then I fell in love with the dead, and I was like, I'm just gonna, like school, I just don't really care anyways. I'm just going to leave school here and go, follow them and go to, from show to show. And, I was searching though. I was searching for that emptiness, that hole in my soul. And I just needed to fill it, and thinking
something to belong to. And
I just wanted to be a part of. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel loved and safe. And, I felt loved, in the crew that I was with, with the dead, but it definitely wasn't a safe environment. And there were a lot of drugs, it was
for sure.
The psychedelics and, my alcoholism, I always say, is wrapped up in so many different color bows. I just was this chameleon, I went through like the meth phase, the psychedelics, the stimulants, the opiates, and just whatever space my life was in.
I feel like you have to, I was the same way. I went through all of those phases, and the festival phase where I was trying to find my community. But I feel like you try to take every avenue, at least I did before I got sober. Like you try to find something that's going to work to fill that, you know, like maybe it's this specific thing and this specific community that I need to be with. And then it never,
you got to check all the boxes.
Exactly. You have to exhaust every option before you give up and surrender to anything else.
Totally. And that's what I did. So,
how long did you follow the dead around?
From 90, I dropped like 10th grade, 90, little 91, but then all the way till Jerry died, like I ended up having a child. We haven't gotten there yet. And he kind of went with me to the shows. So I'll cut to, there was just this massive, recipe ingredients of addiction, up until I was 16, and the emptiness that I had that, come to know now only God could fill that void. I did not know that. I was just searching, reaching, and I found out I was pregnant, and that emptiness, I thought that this child was going to fix that hole, right? Like, oh, this is going to fill that void, and it's going to give me the love that I've been seeking my entire life. And it's going to give me a purpose and something to love back. And, I hate the word California sober, but I was California sober throughout that pregnancy. I was like, weed's okay. And like a little, a little bit of wine.
It's organic.
But really like all the old heavy stuff, and cigarettes I stopped. Like I was very maternal, just wanting to like, really honor this child that chose me. And, I share this, that I had no defense. I was dry. I had put the stuff down. I didn't understand the spiritual malady, the brain. I had no idea. And this baby's born, and he's put on my chest, and the love that I had for him was everything. It was just like, I've never felt that kind of love, and that feeling that I will do anything to protect you and to love you and care for you. And it's going to be different, like him and I are going to have this stability, and I'm going to give him what I didn't have and create safety for him. Like all these things after he was born were, like my intentions were to protect him and love him and care for him. And, my disease was just picking up steam, doing push-ups in the parking lot. And I had no idea. And I remember, and I share this a lot, the love that I felt for him in that moment was just the most powerful thing I've ever felt in my entire life. But my alcoholism left untreated is more powerful, and it's stronger. And I've proven that, I've proven that too many times. It's so shitty.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, it's just an incredible thing. It's like, for people that don't understand, you know what I mean? And they're just on the outside and they're like, what? It's just like, there's nothing more powerful other than God.
And that's the reference. Like that's my reference.
That's
like
That's the highest
the most
point,
important
right?
thing in my life. If I don't take care of this illness that I suffer from on a daily basis, that disease will take over the love of my life, these children of mine. Yeah, freaking brutal. So brutal.
How old were you when you had him?
I was pregnant at 16. I had him when I was 17. Okay. And then from 17 to 19 got real dark and it was just, I was really sick. Yeah. I was really, really sick in my disease. And that's when I tried to get sober.
Sober the first time at 19.
First time, 94. Yeah.
And you went to Exodus.
I didn't get to go to Exodus.
Oh, you didn't?
All my friends went to, I had to like raw dog it at home, like sweating. And that's when I went to Second and Hill, like the Venice meeting.
What were you coming off of?
Meth.
Okay.
Yeah. Meth and alcohol.
Yeah.
So that was like.
Just at home, depressed, sleeping. Just in the
dark pit, in the dark, like sludge. Yeah. And I had like OD'd actually between 17 and 19 within that space. In that I don't talk about it a lot, because it was visual for me. Like I felt my body, my soul leaving my body. And it wasn't like I was like transcending into the light. Like it was dark. And I like the vibration was so low. It was almost like this horror nightmare dream. Right. But, I had been up for like 9 days, and, my heart just couldn't take anymore. Yeah. And I remember lying there, and it was, you felt like you were in this like frozen state of paralysis. And I heard like screaming and crying. It was like a cartoon version of hell. You know what I mean? Like the flames and the screaming and it was just this low, dark vibrational space that I couldn't get out of, and I couldn't wake up, and I couldn't. And I remember thinking someone needs to throw me a ladder, but there's no ladder long enough to reach me. Like that's what I was like thinking in my head. But then like I kind of came out of my body, and my body was like laying on the bed. Wow. And you know, by the grace of God, like I had work to do here, and it wasn't my time, you know. And
asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And it took me, I don't know how long I was in that state. It felt like 10 hours, you know, that like paralysis of like, just get me out of here. And that wasn't enough, you know, that wasn't enough to wake me up. I still had like 18 more years of destruction in me and 2 more kids to be had. You know, the journey's long and wild. The journey's so big. There's so many branches on this tree. So maybe you guys come in and like, you know, bring it back, because I will,
you know,
go.
Yeah, I feel like I first heard about you when I was, God, it was early sobriety, because I was following Lyon through somebody else. And I remember watching that journey.
Yeah.
And then watching you being a part of that journey and giving the updates and watching that. I remember like in my early sobriety, watching that and being like so incredibly inspired.
Yeah.
Like in the early days of like trying to figure this out and like stress and like, you know, just getting sober. And I remember watching that journey and just being like so incredibly inspired. And it was just it was very impactful for me. You know, it's just like a silent watcher from like the sidelines.
Yeah.
It was so incredible. And I feel like that is a big part of.
It's the biggest part.
Yeah.
You know, it's the biggest part. And we'll kind of like circle around that right now. You know, the child I had, I ended up having 2 more, was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer when I was 6 weeks pregnant with my daughter. And that was in 1996. Mm-hmm. And it shifted everything, because now I had to make life-changing decisions with these doctors. But I didn't know how to feel those big feelings. And, you know, for the next 27 years, you know, he battled his disease, and, you know, half of it I was numb and I didn't know how to walk through something so scary. And I just kind of like danced around, you know, stealing his pain meds and having a night out and taking, you know, not 1 Ativan, but like 6, you know, and then being at a concert and, you know, blacking out in the EMTs or you know, that was, and then having to go back to the hospital, you know, and just, you know, this was this cycle, this vicious cycle that I was in and he was in. And, you know, he saw my life change at 2 years of sobriety. And, you know, it's weird skipping around. Mm-hmm. It's weird skipping around because I'm used to this timeline of telling the story and this journey. Basically, I'm going to rewind. Before I got sober, Lyon was partying with me. And within my 20s, he had major surgeries, chemotherapy, tumors, you know, so many treatments that we had to navigate, and I was not sober. And I kind of, you know, the guilt and shame of my using, that he was using the way I was, and I was, you know, co-signing it because I was doing it, with him. You know, I was not the example that he needed. It's hard to talk about. Fuck, you know, it's, but at 2 years sober, when I did get sober, he saw my life change and he saw the light come back into my eyes, because there was this deep rooted suffering. I self-inflicted, you know, the self-inflicted suffering, because I was clinging to this narrative of all this was happening to me. And when I got sober, being able to release that wait a minute, all this is happening for me. And the clinging was creating the suffering. And he just saw this transformation, and he made his way into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, he left his body when he was 9 years sober.
Wow.
In 2019, his cancer came back. There were inoperable tumors. And you probably followed him before that, because there was a lot of 2017, we did chemo. There were always tumors, but in 2019 is when we couldn't turn the ship around.
Right.
And for the next 4 years, in sobriety, this is just, it's so impactful and it's so powerful because, we got to walk through this and feel everything that came with it. And understand it and talk about it instead of running. Before it was I'm going to run around it, above it, under it. I don't want to have to walk through it. And, it was this mindfulness of we get to feel the intensity of this. We get to feel this together. And my husband's coming up on 30 years sober. Wow. And so within this space, we had recovery, and everyone, in our world, just kind of this soft landing for us. And it was intense. And, understanding that the suffering's never in vain, right? That's something Lyon and I used to talk about all the time. We'd get to the ER and he'd be like, what the fuck, Mom? Why? I don't understand. Yeah. And I was like, none of this suffering is in vain. There's a bigger picture, I promise. And to his last breath, he was the essence of inspiration, right? To so many. He just, steer me back.
Yeah.
When it gets heavy, sometimes I'm
I would say that that's the reason why I brought it up. I mean, you talk about the suffering not being in vain.
It's not in vain.
The inspiration that I got from that.
Yeah.
As somebody I was watching when I was in active addiction.
Wow. Wow.
And then I was watching after I got sober.
Yeah.
Right? And I watched all those updates. I mean, it was
yeah.
I'm if these people can walk through this, and I didn't even know you guys, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend who was a friend, and I'm if these people can walk through this, I can walk through what I'm walking through.
I think thank you. And I think that's such a huge message of his story and my story, of life is going to happen. Life is going to continue to happen. And within that space, there's just deep growth, if you're willing to, uncover what's underneath that. And, we lost our house in the Woolsey fire. I don't know if you knew my brother. Did you know my brother?
Yeah.
Lost him in 2022. Lost my other brother in 2008 in a skateboarding accident. And, all these things happen. And it's it almost felt during that the universe was now's the time, cocktail time, happy hours here.
Right.
You've earned it. These are really big feelings. These are a little too much. And it was almost this, it felt my mind or the universe was pushing, the intent of the drink on me. And, it was just these lesson after lesson, okay, I walked through that. Can I walk through this? And because I walked through that, I'm a little bit stronger to be able to walk through this. And I've seen that I can break in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can't be broken. And I'm going to continue, to hold that mentality that I can't be broken and just stay in the middle. And, it is the message. It's life is going to happen and rip us to shreds and, tear us down and throw us on the ground. And, it's very clear to me that a drink and a drug won't bring my son back. A drink and a drug won't bring my brother back. It won't bring everything in that home back. It's this inside job. Like I can't identify myself with these external things.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
Because I was the mom, I was the caretaker, I was the mom of the kid with cancer. And, before our house burned, it was like, oh, all these things, like people come into my house and they're going to know who I am by looking at all these things, all these outside things. And,
right.
I was like attaching myself to this external identity. And then just one by one, as things are stripped away, what's left, it's here. And that is the relationship, right? Like the relationship that I've gotten to create with God, knowing that I am made up of the essence of God, having this human experience. And that's everything, that's everything for me. Cause I can unzip the flesh suit, let it fall to the ground, and what's left, it's not the external things that I'm going to identify with for validation, and Lyon went through that like stripping process as he was dying. One by one, it was like the surfing got taken away, and then the motocross got taken away. He had drains and PICC lines and abscesses, and he couldn't get wet for 4 years. He couldn't even take a shower. He was like a fish. And it was like one by one, all these external things. And for us to sit in that space in sobriety, like feeling it,
right.
We would talk about it. We're like, it's so crazy that this is highlighting like the core of who you are. Like you're not allowed to identify yourself anymore as like the
right.
tan beach hot guy. He was like frail and pale, and
right.
and you're not the surfer anymore. You're not the motocross rider. You're not, all these things. And what was left was like his heart and soul and his
right.
strength and wisdom. And that's what he shared. And that was a direct result of him doing the work.
Wow.
Yeah. He like was willing to do the work, and this was part of the work. His disease was part of the work that we got to do.
Yeah. And you guys were so open.
Yeah.
Like through so much of that process. I mean, I feel like it was like so much of the world got to watch that.
I have videos like 5 days before he died. We called them the bathroom diaries. I've posted a few of them, but I would sit on the floor. He would be in the bathroom forever just because his insides were so broken. And we would have these conversations. I have them recorded that, he's going to see the bigger picture. He's like right around the corner. He's about to leave his body
right.
and see. It's almost like this tapestry, right? Like this beautiful silk tapestry, and every single thread holds a relationship, an experience, an emotion, suffering, like whatever it is. And we would talk about that for years, like what the tapestry of our life. And it's not for nothing. Every single thing that we walk through has a thread, and it's part of this tapestry. And the impact of being so vulnerable and transparent and sharing this journey and wrapping it in sobriety, that we were able to walk through this and feel it, feel the most raw, vulnerable, scary feelings, is not for nothing, because it's going to inspire, and it's like the ripple effect, the pebble in the pond. Right. And so like, before he left, we'd sit, in the bathroom, and I was like, you're going to see this tapestry. And from the other side, you're going to see the ripple effect of your strength and your wisdom and your transparency. And I would just like hold his face, and I'm like, I'm so excited for you. Like, I'm so excited for you that like your circle's complete, and your work that you came here to do was so powerful, and your suffering was never in vain. Every trip to the ER, every surgery, every PICC line, like there's something so much bigger. And, he walked through it with such integrity. And, I was left with this feeling. I would write about it, like how proud I was of him. It wasn't like that didn't happen to me. losing him happened for me.
Right.
And that sounds weird, like losing a child to say that. But, I got to walk him to the veil. Yeah. Like I got to do that. And the only reason I got to do that is because I was sober. I would have missed it. Right. There's so much I would have missed. And, talk about big feelings.
God.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing bigger.
Right.
Like there's nothing bigger. But I'm also very clear that everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. Mm. And he needed me sober. He needed to be sober. Like all the destruction and the self-inflicted suffering had to happen to bring us to our knees when it brought us to our knees in order for the rest of our life to unfold so that I can become a death midwife in 2019 and I can walk people home before my son and prepare for that because I've walked many to the veil.
Wow.
And so I was able to sit in that space because of my sobriety. Right. I couldn't do that loaded, right? Like no way. And
do you still do that?
I do.
Wow.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I just, I had lost a lot of people in my life and just in AA, we lose a lot, but a lot of family members. There's just been a lot of death in my life. And I realized that I was really comfortable in that space. Mm. I was almost fascinated just because I feel so connected, to the soul's journey where I'm like, I know I'm just borrowing this body for a short amount of time and this is earth school. And so I really needed to submerge myself into it deeper. I think subconsciously knowing that Lion's time was going to expire. And I wanted to be able to experience the full effect
be there for it,
of that. And so I had, sat with several people before his passing. And when he decided to go on hospice, it was the bravest, most honorable thing. He kind of made this post that it was time.
Yeah, he was done fighting and he was...
Yeah, and I was like, stand in your truth, honey. Who are you fighting for? Are you fighting for other people or for you? Like, let's, lay the cards on the table. Like, what does this look like for you? Like, you're the only one who can speak for you and you're going to know when your soul's ready. And he really was holding on to... not wanting to disappoint people. It was weird. We had to kind of work through that. He's like, I've just been this positive source of inspiration and I don't want to let people down. And I was like, no. And I'm like, honey, this is the most esteemable act that you can do for yourself. The courage that it takes to stand in your truth. Your truth is your body's done. It's expired, and you're the only one who knows what this feels like. And if you're ready, to leave this body behind, then like the strength and the wisdom and the courage that it takes to lay those cards on the table is that in itself is the most inspiring thing ever. And so he did that and we just kind of embraced. I was like, you've been on life support with all these, tubes and gadgets. And I was like, let's bring this to death support and, support you in that space. And we had a living memorial. Like 200 of his friends came and said goodbye. And, I just said, the most important thing is not to leave any stone left unturned, like say your goodbyes, your thank yous, let people come in and have that time. And we just kind of opened our home for a couple weeks and it was just this flood of people constantly where I was like, oh, I'm so exhausted right now. Yeah. I'm so tired. But he was able to go, on his own terms. And there was so much courage and respect in that. Like, ask me a question.
Yeah. God, that was amazing. Like from when he made that decision, how long did it take?
He made the decision November 29th, that he was on palliative care for like 2 years, just this like ongoing life support and in and out of the hospitals. And he was like, I think it's time for hospice. And I was like, let's call your doctor.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
You know, He had his palliative care doctor who was also hospice. And we kind of laid the cards on the table, and Lyon was like, I want to make it to Christmas. I want one more Christmas. Wow. And he's like, actually, I want one more New Year's too. And we were like, why? Like, why? And he's like, I want one more Christmas. And I was like, but what's Christmas going to look like? So he had already stopped his TPN, and his TPN was like his IV nutrition. He had been off of it for like a week because his stomach was just leaking so much. And
so he's no longer getting
nutrition. He was no longer and his doctor was like, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you're not going to make it till Christmas. Wow. And Lyon was like, well, what if he was trying to manipulate the situation. Yeah. Wow. And I was like, sweetie, what is Christmas going to look like? Is it going to be you like half, alive in bed while we're like trying, let's think about this. And so his doctor was like, you know what, why don't you guys celebrate Christmas early? And I was like, done, we'll celebrate Christmas every day until you go. And we literally did. We had 2 trees. It was like Christmas threw up in our house, just lights everywhere and presents, and every single day was like a Christmas meal. His friends were coming over. Yeah. So we did Lyon's fantasy meals. We just made a list of all his like final fantasy meals, and they were extravagant. Yeah. And I was like, all right, we'll make this happen. And he said, I want my final meal to be a lobster boil. And, this is actually funny because there were 3 times that we thought he was leaving his body, where I called my youngest son home from school. Right. I was like, it's time, leave. And Harper would be driving like 90 miles an hour over Canaan trying to make it. And we're all around Lyon, crying. And he would 3 separate times open his eyes. He was like, meatloaf, just like, what are you guys doing? And we were like, what the fuck? Like, we thought you were dead. Like, we thought you were, and he's like, why is everyone staring at me? And we're like, honey, you were done. Your vitals were like on the floor. Like, hospice nurse was like, get everyone in here. Happened 3 separate times. And the final one, he woke up or just kind of came to, and he was like, okay, so for the lobster boil. And we were like, you've got to be kidding me. And he was like, let's do the lobster boil on Thursday. And this was on Sunday. And I was like, babe, I don't think you're going to make it till Thursday. He's like, no, I'm going to die on Friday. Let's do the lobster boil on Thursday. And he was so serious. And me and the boys were all his friends. We were like, there's no way this damn lobster boil is like killing us. And I was like, it's kind of a big deal, sweetie. We got to get like the big pans and the lobster and the crab. And he's like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you can do it. He's like, lobster boil on Thursday. And so the whole time we're like, there's no way he's going to make it. Thursday comes and we're like, okay, get the lobster. Like, so we order like Malibu seafood, all these lobsters and crabs. We set the tables up like literally Jesus's like final supper. It was just like in our backyard, just full lobster boil, like corn, potatoes, crab, lobster. Hospice nurse is there. All his friends come, like his closest friends. We wheel him out in his wheelchair. We have like heat lamps. It's December, cold. Yeah. And I have a picture. He took a bite of one little piece of lobster and sat there and just kind of like looked at everyone. And he was like, okay, I'm done. And we brought him back into his room, and that was his last meal. Wow. He knew. God. He was like, the lobster boil was his last supper. Yeah. And so it's like so symbolic because we have these pictures of like the table set up and him just at the head of the table, just his one little bite of lobster. And that was it. Yeah. And there's so many things, within that space. It was like the final meals and, what he wanted to do, who he wanted to see, his ex-girlfriend that, was like the love of his life. It was like, just bring Nicoletta here. He was married and then she left 8 months before he passed, but we don't That's all we'll say. But his like he's like, I just want Nicoletta here. And so she came, and like, he just had all these little check lists. He knew
all the things that he wanted.
Like the people he needed to see, the closure he needed to have, the meals he needed to eat. Like, he was so clear on it all.
Wow.
And, you know, after that, it's like, I got to sit in that space. Like, it's not lost on me, you know, like how sacred and special that time was and is and continues to be. You know, driving here, I was on the freeway talking to him. I talk to him all the time. And I was like, all right, babe, I'm like, you know, going to go do this podcast, and I'm going to probably talk about you. You know, I'll have these like, and I look up, and he was born in 1992. And in motocross, his number was 92 on all his plates. So we've made stickers 92, and I'm driving, and I look in front of me, and I was like, whoa, wait. And there was a sticker. It was like a brand new white Cadillac Escalade, and there was a 92 sticker, not one of ours. And I literally took a picture of it. And I was like, no way. So he like makes himself known. He's like, I got you, mama.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful.
God. Yeah. He's like very present.
Yeah.
Just like I mean, to me, it's just like the story of like the human spirit, you know?
Yeah.
That he just, I mean, it was like, I don't know.
And you
it's
being
one of
able
the
to
most
receive that
inspirational things that I've ever witnessed, and wasn't there, and just only saw through what you guys posted, and it just was like, I mean, just amazing.
I know.
It's amazing.
You know, and there's so much like the gift of being these kids' moms. You know, I've got 3 kids, and you know, I share like in recovery what it did for me and my parenting journey. In 2016, I got that call from the Malibu Times. I've shared about it at your meeting. And it's just so, it's so rad. Like 4 years before, I'm living in a garage, like strung out, not well, unwell, like drinking myself to death, yellow, swollen liver. You know, I had left my marriage, blew my marriage up. At the time, he was sober and I was untreated, and, you know, just blew that one up. Moved into my mom's garage, and I remember that feeling like, you know, the hall monitor, the warden are gone, and so I destructed for 3 years, really bad, you know, in this garage, you know, with these 3 kids that needed me. In 2016, I get a call from the Malibu Times, this woman, Sarah, and she's like, is this Barbie? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, this is Sarah from the Malibu Times. It kind of sounded official. And I was like, whoa, you know, the CIA, the FBI, the police, like Malibu Times, they're all in the same, you know, I'm like definitely in trouble. And I remember like wanting to change my name, like retract. I'm like, this is Linda. Like I did not want to be Barbie.
I can get Barbie. What is the message?
Hold on. What's the message? And she was like, do you have a minute? I was like, it depends. And she was like, I just want to let you know that you won 2016 Malibu Times Mother of the Year. And, you know, I share that because, you know, our minds want to keep us so sick and keep us small. And I had to go outside and like take a breath and recap the work that I had done in my recovery, you know, in the amends that I had made, and, you know, the deep work that I put forward, and realize that, wait a minute, like maybe this is true. And she said that my 3 kids had written in letters of what an amazing mom I was. Not I had became, like I was almost like I always was. And I was like, wait a minute, like where's the catch? And realized that I became PTA president of my son's school to like make an amends to my education. And, you know, my daughter and we had the most severed relationship ever. Like she's the one that saved my life. And, you know, the morning I decided to get sober, like the final words she said to me before she got out of the car to go to school were, she just looked at me at this glare. She's like, you're disgusting. And I was like for whatever reason, I felt it that morning. And within those 4 years, like she graduated, you know, high school, and I helped her get into college and moved her in and did the set up the dorm, and, you know, mom's weekend at sorority. You know, there were all these like weird milestones that I never, ever dreamed I would be capable of doing. And, you know, so that Mother of the Year, she read me the letters that my kids wrote in. And, you know, I share like the miracles and the promises of this program. Like, you don't know what that looks like. And I would have missed it.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
You know, I would have missed, I would have never been able to dream up something so amazing and so powerful. And, you know, that Mother of the Year, that bled off into walking Lyon home. You know what I mean? Like that, the energy behind being Mother of the Year, like carried me through, you know, like, wow, like my kids acknowledged who I am to them. And it was almost this like motivation to keep going. And I would have never gotten Mother of, I mean, are you kidding? I was strung out living in a garage, you know, 4 years before, but like, these are the gifts, right? Like the gifts of sobriety and recovery. And it's just all encompassing.
What did it look like when you got sober? Like this last time?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
Like, I feel like that has so much to do in the preparation of everything else too, right?
Yeah. You know, when I blew that marriage up, I had 3 relationships that were all kind of like lower than the next. And I remember I went to Hawaii thinking, I'm going to have this like clean out trip and I'm going to go do yoga and drink coconuts. And, you know, I was always trying to find the balance, like all nighter, go get like a wellness shot, you know, at Vitamin Barn, like, you know,
upper downer.
I'm going to like sweat through yoga with like vodka sweating out of me, like always thinking like I'm finding a balance. I was really just unwell. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the Big Island. And I was with my boyfriend at the time. And I'm like, we're just going to dry out. Like, let's just drink some smoothies and juice and swim and do yoga and like get some vitamin D. And just, we had big plans. And the night before we left, and I share this because it leads up to, you know, March 29th, 2012. This was the week before.
Okay.
The night before I was like, you know what, let's just bring like 1 8-ball. And so what that looked like was, you know, the melatonin capsules. The entire night we had a 7 a.m. flight. We were like chopping up blow, putting them in the melatonin capsules
to bring with you.
Okay, that's so smart.
Carry on with us. Like, these are melatonin capsules. What are you talking about? And so then it's just, I don't want to like give away like, you know, cool secrets, but then it was like the perfect little like one hitter, like on the beach or whatever. And so we get to the airport and already like the idea of, you know, our fantasy sober up vacation is done. We get to the airport. We're like sweaty, had been up all night, just like super sketched. You know, everyone's looking at us. And, you know, the second we get on the plane, we're like, we need a drink. So we proceed to get hammered. You know, we hadn't been up. We're just like, we get to the airport. The first thing we do is get to the liquor store and buy the hugest bottle of like vodka, but with like the tropical juice. You know, and then there's this hat embroidery store, and we both get 2 baseball hats. One says fear, one says loathing. So that was like the first day one. We never
setting the tone for the
we
trip.
never made it out of the hotel room. Like, it was just like debauchery, gross. So I came back from that trip on Monday, and I hated myself. Like, I hated myself. Tuesday, Wednesday comes. Wednesday night, I remember the final drink, the final line. Like, I remember it, where like nothing would even go up my nose. Like, it was just like nothing would go up. That feeling of just like, oh my God, how much more, you know? And I was a barfer. Like, I love a good, like, clean it out and put some more in. That's just who I am. Like, my body's so allergic to alcohol, but I would just work through that continuously. So that night, I think I had already thrown up like twice. we were at Cafe Cabana in Malibu and then come back in and keep drinking. Just gross.
Right.
And so the surrender morning was when I picked my daughter up to take her to school. And she said I was disgusting. It's because I was. I was absolutely disgusting. And, the surrender of that moment, waving the white flag, like knowing this like window, this God shot moment was like here. And it was almost like this whisper where God was like, I've been here all along. Like I've been here. You've been so on your own will, running the show and toxic, but like I'm here and like I got you. And it was almost this like comforting, like, okay, like now is the time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe those God shots, it's that feeling.
Yeah.
And I called a girlfriend who had 21 years of sobriety, and she was like, I've been saving you a warm, cozy seat. I'm going to pick you up. And she took me to my first meeting this time. It was in Hollywood, Fountain and Vine, and just the feeling of surrender, a fear. There was so much fear because I didn't know how to walk through life without pushing those feelings away from my heart, right? Like that's my MO. Like the cocaine on the gums, keep it numb, just like keep it away from my heart. I don't want anything to touch this. And knowing that all these things that I had pushed down for so many years were going to have to work their way up, like that was so scary to me. That was so scary. But I knew if I didn't surrender, like death was right around the corner for me. Like I was not well.
Yeah.
And I was so willing. I was so willing to feel different than what I was feeling at that moment, that I found women's meetings on my phone and just childcare, brought my little guy to every single meeting. And whether there was childcare or not, he would like sit on my lap. I was like, I need to be here. No one like told me I had to leave. Like he was cool. I would, bring his little earphones with his.
I did the same with my son too.
I was that mom. And every, at women's meetings, like they know. Yeah. They're like, and I just was so desperate and did the deal. And I knew enough about AA from my ex-husband, from my brother. My brother had like 6 years at one time. And, I knew this thing worked. Like I knew when it didn't. And that was when you took your will back, because I watched it with my brother, and I watched him slip when all of a sudden it was that like, oh, I got this. And later watched it, with my ex-husband, like, you stop going to meetings and you think you got this. And, so I knew enough that I had to stay on the playing field and be in the team, like a team member. And so that was, the husband, I met him 3 weeks in my sobriety. He hates when I share about it. He had 16 years. He didn't know I had 3 weeks. He's like, you are such a bitch. He was like, we were set up on a blind date and he's like, I heard you're sober. And I was like, I am.
Yeah.
He's like, how much time do you have? And I was like, I got some time. Because 3 weeks, right?
Yeah. Like 3 weeks is a long time.
Yeah, for you. That was like,
like you can't put 24 hours together. And it's like, 24 hours, 21 days in a row. I was like, that's some time. Yeah. And I wasn't kidding when I said that, but I also knew I'm not going to be like 3 weeks. Because I knew he had 16 years. And I also knew enough to know like 13 step was a thing and like the whole year rule. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like show him.
I'm just going to play it a little bit.
That,
I'm recovered. Yeah.
I'm just going to like give it some time and show him that I'm like pretty stable. Yeah. But I was like still detoxing, right? Like sweating at night, having to take Epsom salt baths and, the joint achy muscle, just nightmare. But we took it so slow. Like we didn't move in together for 2.5 years, but I sent him a picture of my 60-day chip and he was like, whose is this? And I was like, that would be mine. And he was like, what do you talk? He was blown away. He was like, you said you had some time. And I was like, I do. I've got 60 days now. That's definitely some time.
Yeah.
And so he didn't leave. Thank God.
So did you get a sponsor pretty quickly? And
I got a sponsor 30 days in. Okay. It was like exactly on 30 days. I was at a meeting in Venice at the Stronghold meeting. And people were like handing me cards, you know, like call me. Cause I was like standing up as a newcomer, and this one girl was sitting in front of me, and she like, you know, handed me her card, and I just kept putting them in my book. And then
asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
I think it was at 30 days is when I called her. I started to just get that really uncomfortable. I was like, okay, what now? Like, what do I do? Like, I've kind of held on for 30 days and like, this isn't sustainable. Like, I knew that. And so I called her, and I had such a hard time asking her to sponsor me because I had been through so much in my life that it was almost this like badge of honor that like, I don't need help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Totally.
I never went to
you
rehab.
had taken care of yourself forever.
I had taken care. I detoxed at home every time.
Asking
like
for
I don't.
help.
Yeah. And
It's
so
hard.
I worded it. I was like, can you show me how to go through the steps?
That
was how I worded it. And she was like, oh, show you how so you can, you want me to show you how? And I was like, yeah, just show me how it's done. And she was like, why don't I take you through the steps? And I was like, like, I don't know if I really need that. Like, I just show me.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to call it that. That's a little strong.
It was funny. I had this like, you know, I didn't want to like surrender to help.
Yeah.
And she was like, meet me at my house on Tuesday night. You know, there was another meeting in Venice. So every Tuesday I met her. She was like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit down and we're going to read the book and we're going to go through the steps together. And I was like, oh, is that how it's done? Is that? And she was like, yeah. And so we just fell into this, you know, routine of, you know, doing the steps. And I was with her for a year and then realized I needed to go a little deeper. And she was a little intertwined with friends. And I was like, you know what? I need to find someone like who has no connection.
Yeah.
And that's when I really dove in and went deep and got honest. And that's when like the work really started to transpire, right? Like when we're safe in that space.
Use the restroom real quick.
Yeah, go for it. To just get vulnerable and
totally.
And dive
What
in.
does your life look like today? 13 years you said, right? 13 years in.
My life today looks like, so my daughter who called me disgusting, bought a house literally right down the street from me. Like we walked to each other's
houses. Are you
houses.
guys like best friends
She's
now?
my best friend.
Oh, I love
like
that.
my absolute best friend. And we bonded losing Lyon. You know what I mean? That was a big thing. My youngest guy's at University of Montana, got him to college. I'm happily married to, you know, the man who has some time. He actually has some time. And, you know, our home is built around the principles of this program. There's, you know, I grew up in chaos and he did too.
Yeah.
You know, within our space, it's like we can talk. We don't yell. You know, I no longer throw furniture. You know, there's just this like gentle, and we've been able to set this example. He's got 2 boys and I had the 3. So we were like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
You know, set the tone of healthy living for them. You know, you walk into our house and it's like, there's peace and there's serenity. You know, I've got a meditation practice. I sponsor 12 girls. I've got my hands full.
Wow. Yeah.
I have a sponsor. She is in Minnesota. She's an Indigenous elder. Great grandmother.
Wow.
And she too has lost a child. And so we can share that space together. And she's just filled with, you know, deep soul wisdom. You know, I realize that for me, working creatively on my own is the best thing for me. So I get to do that. I make blankets, you know, and I never realized that life could be this simple and I can be this happy and content within this space, right? Like I always thought like the chaos, right? Like I loved just tugging on the chaos. And every time you like hold on to the chaos in the narrative, like the universe is pulling back and it's a rope and you're going to get rope burns. And that creates suffering, just holding on. And once you just kind of like stay neutral and release and let life happen in this organic way and the simplicity of it, you know, staying connected to God, like that's the space I'm in right now. There's no like cursing God ever, you know, like you took all these people away and you like, there's no blaming, you know. I feel like I was ready for all these things to happen. And, you know, as chaotic as life can be, every single night, I have a superpower of peace, right? Like I can lay my head on the pillow and like deep in this space, there's this understanding and this wisdom and knowledge of reconnecting with my truth. You know what I mean? Like I lost track of my higher self and my truth within my addiction, and having that realigned, but having to work on that every single day in prayer and meditation. Like I have a deep meditation practice, and I talk to God and I talk to Lyon and I talk to my ancestors. You know, I stay really connected to the spirit world. You know, it's helped me just kind of realign in this space of beauty. You know, it's so simple and it's so beautiful. And my life has gotten big. You know, I get asked to speak at convention. You know, there's big things where I'm like, whoa, you know, what's happening? But it's trusting in the unfolding of life. Like I'm just trusting in this process. And I'm grateful. I am a grateful alcoholic. Wow. You know, we hear that, but yeah. Where are we at?
Hour 15.
Yeah.
We got like 15 more minutes.
Oh. Yeah. I wasn't sure. I was like, when's time's up? I don't know.
Yeah,
we go until it's
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that first sponsor.
Yeah.
You did the work and made all your amends, or was it kind of like not all the way in?
No.
It wasn't until the second one?
No, I didn't make all my amends with her because I didn't make dad for 4 years.
Yeah, that's the one I wanted to know.
So that was 4 years. You know, there were amends made, but the hefty ones, the heavy ones that were at the bottom, sat for a while, and I needed a sponsor to really, and she kind of, sponsor number one kind of became my friend. And so it was a little like blurred where she was like homie, and, you know, we kind of created this crew of Venice girls, and I needed someone a little harder to kick my ass and be like, oh no, this is like, there's no leeway. Like this needs to get done in order for you to be free.
Was mom around? Where mom?
Yeah. So mom is still kicking. I see her like twice a week.
Okay.
She's a wild one. We're sometimes oil and water, but you know, I was taught to, you know, just show up and love and compassion, and I lead with compassion, and I'm like, it's okay. We don't have to be the same. Like my daughter and I get along so well. And so with mom and I, sometimes but there's so much love there, and there's so much forgiveness, and she's able to recognize now, like, you know, she's not sober, but she's not, you know, she's 75. She's not partying like she once was. But she can recognize like the mistakes that she's made. And so like within that space, you know, we can heal together. And so yeah, she's still around. And I've done a lot of work around her. You know, I've done a lot of work around her. You know, within the amends, it's, you know, with her, it's, again, I held her expectation. You know, I had expectations unrealistic, and I held her hostage. Sorry, I got those words jumbled. Because, you know, I compared her to these other Malibu moms, and I wanted her and needed her to show up like them. And that's not who she is. And so today I just totally accept her. She goes to car shows. She goes to NHRA races. Like we'll travel.
She's still a badass.
Yeah. Like breeze in, you know, her nitro, whatever. She said that like makes her the happiest. She has her car club guys. She has a 66 Chevelle that she got for her 17th birthday that she brings every Friday night to Bob's for like the car show night. She's still the exact same. So mom's definitely in the picture. Stepdad number 4, she met at CMC, California Men's Correctional. And he was a motorcycle gang affiliate. And they were together for 30 years, in and out. He struggled. He was one of us. He struggled major and would get busted and go back and come out and go back. And he passed away in May. And I got to walk him to the Veil, and he left with 3 years of sobriety.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
There was a lot of healing in the last couple years. He was there when Lyon, passed, and his was a result of his, previous drinking. He had liver cancer, and but to be able to like hold space for him, he was a huge resentment for me, a huge resentment. With my mom and him, they kept the dysfunction of the relationship secret. And finally it just kind of became transparent, and just being able to like hold his hand while he took his last breath, and literally walk him home, in sobriety, and he was so mindful too. He was like, Barb, I've struggled my entire life and I finally have 3 years. And he didn't want to take the morphine. He was like, I want to feel this. I need to feel this. And so he would just suck it up. And he was like, I get to feel this. I want to do it like Lyon did,
Oh, God.
Oh, my
God.
That
is amazing.
Just amazing. Finally, like the last day, we were like, let's get him some morphine. But, up until the very end, just he's like, I want to be clear. I want to experience this. And it was so sweet. He would go outside. He's like, the sky just looks so much bluer. And I feel like the trees are talking to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, the veil is coming down. You're like in between two worlds. And it's so rad to feel this. Get to feel this. And so he just really honored the work that he had done in those 3 years to be sober, to be able to leave in that space. And just, witnessing it is so powerful. And we would talk about it. I'm like, you would have missed this. You would have missed seeing the veil come down and seeing the colors change, and, the trees talking to you in sobriety, as you kind of like merging these two worlds. And there's so much magic, right, that we miss from disconnecting, like disconnecting our I use this reference a lot, and I don't know if you've heard me use this reference, the cross. I'm not a religious, I don't fall into a box with religion, but the cross to me is this vertical connection to God, right? Like from my crown chakra, just this ongoing, like to source divine energy throughout my body. And this is the horizontal, which is the human experience, which is the ego, the tangible, the flesh. And I have to find myself in the center of that cross every single day in perfect balance to be able to be a woman in recovery, right? Like a woman of integrity, having this human experience. And so that reference for him, for Lyon and Richard, where are you in that cross right now? Like you're still having a human experience. Like, where's your body? Where's your heart? Where's your soul? Where's the connection? Like, just bring yourself to the center of that cross and check yourself throughout the day. Like, I'll do it. I'm like, am I too horizontal? Am I too external? Worrying about outside things, attaching myself, or sometimes I'm way too, like, I'll get out of a meditation and I'm like floating, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have to come back. Like, I'm having this human experience. Like, I have to participate in.
I have to be here.
Like I have to like, show up. And so just kind of gauging and finding, you know, the balance within the center of that cross is such a powerful tool. And, you know, in that connection, like breathing in love, exhaling gratitude, breathing in love, exhaling gratitude, like making, you know, the vertical and the horizontal and love and gratitude and staying connected. You know, I catch myself probably 10 times a day doing that, just the love and the gratitude and bringing myself back to the center of that cross.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Cause it's, you know, we are just these infinite
trying to understand it too, you know, just like
figure it out.
Yeah.
And life is happening and there's just these big feelings.
There's big fucking feelings, but we're in Earth School.
Yeah.
Like
I love that Earth School. I love that.
We're in Earth School. When Lyon was leaving, I was like, you are graduating. You are graduating before I am. Like you learned what you came here to learn. And I am so proud of you. And I'm like right behind you. I was like, can I throw you a theme party? Like memorial? He's like, of course you would. He's like, what's the theme? I'm like, graduation party. Like I wanted like cap and gown. But I feel like Earth School is one of the hardest schools, you know, hardest planets to incarnate. The hardest one. No, it is. It's like known, like in the, you know, metaphysical world, Earth is one of the hardest planets to incarnate in. And so I always tell people, like my sponsees, I'm like, pat yourself on the back for being willing to participate. You signed the contract to come here. And within that contract was alcoholism, addiction, suffering, all these things in order to bring you to your knees, to be handed this beautiful spiritual program that's going to heal you. And in return, you're going to heal others, right? Like you're going to pass this on like it's a baton and you're the steward of this magic that's going to free us. So like part of your contract is the suffering, the awakening, the service, like all of this. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
You know, it is not easy. So I always, every day, I'm like, I'm alive and I'm going to acknowledge that I signed up for all of this. It's not for nothing. The suffering is not in vain. Everything is happening for me, not to me. I'm going to change the narrative and I'm going to pat myself on the back because this shit is not easy. Right. And we don't have a manual, you know, but we do have the magic of, you know, the 12 steps, which is so powerful, you know, more powerful than any therapist, I don't know. To me, it's just this divine, you know, magic that we get to be a steward of. Yeah. Right.
When you're ready, right? It's like, you got to be ready.
Yeah. You got to be ready.
That's the hardest part is becoming ready.
And you know what? Some people are never ready in this lifetime. And it's like staying unattached to that where, you know, like my brother, I was like, you know, he tried, but, you know, he came and learned what he needed to learn and he taught what he needed to teach. And maybe for me, like he taught me a deeper level of compassion and forgiveness. You know what I mean? Like he taught a lot of people things and he'll get to, you know, come back or not. It depends, you know, who knows? Yeah. We don't know. Wow. Yeah, I'll get like trippy. I have to like stop because I
love that shit. I could get real trippy all day.
Some people look at me like, what? Like if you get me going, like if it's a spiritual, like crazy metaphysical podcast, like we can get into like dimensions and like weird stuff. So I have to like bring it back because I'm like, okay, this is recovery.
Human experience.
But then there's like the death, you know, like the death side of it, which I'm a death doula. So I get fired up about all of that. And then, so I'm trying to like find, it's like a braid, you know what I mean? It's like the spiritual, the death, the alcoholism. And I like braid it into this story.
Incredible. Just like everything that you've gone through in your life, right? To like bring you to this place where you can walk people through to the other side. Yeah. In such a way. I mean, like that is it's
wild.
I mean, most people are that's like, you don't want to be near that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, if you're inviting just me in to say this one thing without going too far down, but our society a century ago handed our death rights to the Western world, right? And replaced it with fear. Literally 100 years ago, it's like, we don't know what to do with it. Call the morgue. Like And so we no longer know what to do.
Right.
Every other culture and society has death rites and ceremonies, but our Western culture does not. God. And so now it's replaced with this unknown. We don't know what to do with a dead body. We don't know how to create ceremony. We don't know how to honor them. So it's like there's this closure. I mean, lack of closure, right? Like take the body, but then we're left with, but that it doesn't feel natural. Like there should have been more, right? Like there should have been more. And so my work is very clear to me. Like I want to replace that fear with ceremony and ritual. And with Lyon, like with his body, we did, I don't know if you saw any of that, but we did a beautiful ceremony with his body and shrouded it and put earth on it and sat with it for 9 hours in his bedroom, and everyone came and anointed him in oil and we bathed him. It was really, really beautiful. So there was this sense of closure for everyone who participated in that. And then they were like, oh, wait, a dead body is not as scary as I thought it was. And death and dying is not it. Like I was taught to be so afraid of this. Right. And so like now they're going to spread that, the pebble in the pond, right? Now they know what to do. And all of his friends said, now I know what to do when someone in my family dies. Right. Like I know how to walk through this. Right. So it's just changing the narrative, right? Like the whole point of living is changing the narrative. We attach ourselves to these fearful thoughts and suffering. And as we grow and we heal, we get to change the narrative, right? And so that feels like deep work for me, is changing the narrative around death and dying. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? God, we all die. We're all going to go through it.
But just that idea that in Western society we have because it's so true.
It's so true.
So this like take
him to the morgue. You get 30 minutes. Like you're in a hospital. They're like, we need to clean the room. Fuck you. Yeah. Like what?
Yeah.
And that happened with my first brother. They took him away and they were like, okay, we gotta. Yeah. We were in the ICU and we took him off life support and all of a sudden we left and I'm like, wait, I feel like we should be like I want to put flowers or like it just felt like this emptiness. And it's like, why is it that way? We have to like reclaim that back. And so I tell, people I work with, I'm like, do not call the morgue until you're ready. Yeah. Do not, because they will, hospice will tell you, time of death, call the morgue. And it's like, you can wait 7 days with dry ice if you want, if you need that time to like sit with the body. Like, no, California, you could do, I believe it's 2 weeks in California. Wow. Yeah. But we just needed 9 hours. We needed that closure. And it's like, and if I didn't know, if I didn't have the training, I would have instantly called and been like, oh my God, okay, pick him up. Like, I don't know what to do. Right. And so I just want to like encourage people and share that there is so much healing in that space. And there's so much beauty in the honoring of, this vessel that lived so beautifully. Right. So yeah. Wow.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. There's a lot. It's hard because I feel like I'm this tree with all these branches and all these different stories and all these lessons. Have you out
here again to do multiple different of your branches.
I always tell people, I'm like, pick a few branches and like keep me on that branch because it like there's just too much, and
but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
We're doing a documentary right now about death and dying and Lyon's life, and we talk about that, like 5 key branches we have to and they're like the lessons, right? Like we have to stay tight on those branches because there's just too much, right? Like we can get into the impermanence of, there's just too much. There's too many weird, deep lessons that I'll go rogue on.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming out.
Thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I got a little pebble now that I can spread. I learned a lot of stuff that I had never.
Pebble in the pond.
When if you go to Lyon's Instagram is still up, right?
Yeah.
So, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah,
Barbie Herron. Yeah. And you can watch, I'll sit in his room and like watch his videos just to hear his voice.
Right.
He would do his little updates. Yeah. And they're just like a few minutes of what's happening with his body, but they were just so positive and encouraging. And he was a light.
Yeah. Positive mental attitude.
PMA. Yeah. his PMA, positive mental attitude. And then it was cute. It was like his whole thing was like heaven ain't ready. He had it tattooed here. And then when he went on hospice, we changed it to heaven is ready.
Oh.
Yeah. His homie Tyler Bierman, who's the big motocross freestyle, he rode in the X Games with Lyon's number.
Oh, yeah.
And changed it to heaven. Oh, he had Lyon cross out the ain't and write is. And so we used that graphic and Tyler wrote heaven is.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And rode with like Lyon's number 92.
Wow.
And medaled.
Yeah.
Wow.
And rode with his ashes. It was very exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks you guys.
Yeah,
Such an
thank
honor.
Appreciate you coming out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.